Hello, this is Doug from Behind Closed Doors, and today I'm going to be reacting to a video by Nicole Arbour and Jordan Peterson talking about dating for women. Let's have a look at the video.
My last question is I'm going to bring it back to, okay, this intelligent woman dating thing. Help, help, because I've gone through the different things. Like I said, I've dated guys who maybe aren't as intellectual as myself, and I get bored. They're super cute and they're hot and they might be athletes and they do really well with what they do, but I'm bored. And then I've gone the other way and I've noticed that they tend to get really insecure about dating someone who might be physically more attractive than them, or people thinking that that's what that is. So I'm not sure where to sit. If people are like, what's your ideal man? I'm like, I have no idea, because I'm like smart.
I think that the data suggesting that women mate across and up hierarchies is true, and that men mate across and down. That looks to me to be true. It looks like it's true cross-culturally, although it varies to some degree. And people who are unfamiliar with that idea or doubt it, you could read Buss, the psychologist, Buss, and he's a credible authority in my estimation. And so the problem then comes is that, imagine there's multiple dimensions along which you might evaluate someone's attractiveness. Mm-hmm. There's personality, there's intelligence, there's athletic prowess, there's socioeconomic status, there's productive capacity, there's creativity, there's lots of dimensions. So then imagine that you're above average on 3 or 4 dimensions. Well, that makes it easier for men because they're mate across and down those hierarchies, but it makes it harder and harder for women because with each dimension they're above average on, if their fundamental desire is to find someone who's of equal or higher status, they shrink their dating.
People, I know.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly right. Well, I also think, and I've seen this when I've counseled women who are intelligent, creative, and attractive and young, and that's 4 like killer attributes. Men were often so intimidated that they never got asked out.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed that happens a lot too. A lot of my gorgeous, amazing, talented female friends who are they just kick ass at so many things. Guys won't even ask them out.
Well, it's not just that guys won't ask them out, they won't ask the guys out that they fancy. That's the problem.
They go for
it's partly because the closer to your hypothetical ideal someone you're attracted to is, the more pain you suffer when you're rejected. So that's why that.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also just general stage fright. Like public speaking is like one of the huge phobias of the world. Like people don't like getting up and standing in front of crowds. And when you are approaching somebody, there's a thing called approach anxiety. And it's a similar feeling to that feeling of going on stage, and people just avoid it because it's fear of the unknown, because this person, if they can destroy your reputation, and that's what women are known to do.
Why that happens. And so men are a lot more afraid of women than women think. Especially women that they're attracted to. Well, it's a total rejection, right? It's a really comprehensive rejection.
The other thing is as well is that a lot of women nowadays, because of feminism, are just really nasty people, and it brings out the worst character traits in someone. And so you have a guy who may be confident in other areas of his life, but he won't approach a girl that he fancies to ask her out because he feels vulnerable, intimidated, anxious. And when women find out that you like them, they generally don't tend to be more attracted to you. They tend to be less attracted to you and repulsed by you.
The comical end of it is, well, you're okay for a friend, but I wouldn't want your genetic material to propagate itself to the next generation.
That was the nerdiest thing you've ever said. I love it.
Yeah, so the more that you like a girl, the more she doesn't like you, the more she's repulsed by you. And the more you're not into a girl, the more attracted to you she is. So the way to get lots of girls is to not like girls. It's also a personal rejection, and it's non-stop. It's sort of like, it really is a sales job, going out and trying to get a girl to like you or to be interested in you or to get a girlfriend or a wife or anything like that. It's a constant, it's as a guy, it's just constant rejection, and it's just a sales process, and it's just a sales funnel. And so what happens is, that's why when a lot of guys do get with a girl, they don't respect her, because they become aware of what's in the nature of women and in the nature of females to be so harsh in their judgments.
So it's an intractable problem to some degree. And I think that part of the reason that human beings are the way they are, it's part of the reason is because female human beings are choosy sexual selectors, unlike chimpanzee females, for example.
Because if you look at a show that we have here in the UK, I don't know if you have it in America or anything, called Take Me Out, the guys go up and the girls viciously reject the man for stupid reasons. I'm not attracted to him anymore. I don't fancy him anymore. Oh, he's not good enough for me. No, I couldn't be with him, because, I like fishing on the weekends. Or, oh, my favourite colour is yellow. Do you know what I mean? Over ridiculous things. Well, as a guy, most guys want a girl that looks nice and behaves nice. 2 criteria. I mean, there's other things as well, but they're the 2 main criteria. Do you look nice and do you act nice? That's the basic, because all that stuff that you was going on about earlier in terms of assessing someone and all these different elements of a person's characteristics and what they have to bring to the table, they're just 2 ones that you can kind of sum it up in. Do they look nice? Do they act nice? There's other things as well, like smell plays a big factor and pheromones and all that kind of stuff, but that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. It's not that women are a bit more fussy. Women are a lot more fussy than men when it comes to sexual selection. So they're the ones that initiate most divorce. They're the ones that are more picky when it comes to mate selection. They're the ones that are more harshly judgmental. And what comes along with that is this entitlement to be harshly judgmental of people when they're not entitled to it. People should be nice. And that's why it's so important to find a nice girl, because women aren't nice to men that fancy them. Because if you're nice, you're weak, you're submissive, and so therefore they're not attracted to you, because they want a dominant, strong male that's above them.
Part of the reason is because female human beings are choosy sexual selectors, unlike chimpanzee females, for example. And so a fair bit of our evolutionary development across time is a consequence of the high standards that women place on eligible men. But it's harsh. And it's hard on women too, because, they shrink their dating pool, for example.
Yeah. Jordan,
now, what's the solution to that?
Yeah,
what's the solution to that?
Come on, my fan base is predominantly female. Most are college and university grads. Just saying, they tend to be hot and smart and awesome and creative.
And that's the problem, is you arrogant snobs.
And be in multiple dimensions. And I get the same questions over and over because they have the same
I guess one of the things I would say to women who aren't being asked out, let's say, do the asking.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. And this whole strong, powerful, independent woman horse shit that everyone espouses, cool, go and ask the guys out that you fancy if you really believe that.
Flip it. Like you have to take it into your own hands. Like if you're not being asked, figure out what you want. This is something that everyone should do, but let's talk to young women. It's like, okay, well, first of all, figure out what you want, what you actually want. And you should.
It's very basic advice Jordan Peterson's offering here. Figure out what you want and go for it. But they're like, I don't know what kind of guy that I want. I go from this guy to that guy. And it's them coming up and asking me out. I don't know if I can ask them out. Why? Because you'd be rejected too. Because if you don't go after something that you want, then you don't stand a chance of failing, do you?
Flip it. Like you have to take it into your own hands. Like if you're not being asked, figure out what you want. This is something that everyone should do, but let's talk to young women. It's like, okay, well, first of all, figure out what you want, what you actually want. And you should talk to someone, your friends or someone you trust, and spend an hour figuring out what you want, and try not to lie to yourself. You know, do you want kids? And when you're 19, it's fashionable to say no, but that's likely a lie. Now, it might be true when you're 19, but the probability that it's going to be true when you're 29 is almost zero. And no one will tell young women that. It's like, I don't care what you think now that you're 19. You don't understand. As you mature, the desire to have a baby will become unbelievably intense. And you need to know that. And if you decide not to have children, that's your decision. But you should be informed that this is what's coming. And in all likelihood, you want children more than you're willing to admit, even at 19. So, well, all right. So,
okay, that's one check. Okay.
Taught this idea that, well, motherhood isn't as high status an occupation as it should be. That's a cultural failing.
Well, I don't think it's a cultural failing. I think it's a cultural indoctrination, because the feminist movement was set up because it couldn't tax housewives. Where if you get them into the workplace, now you can tax women. So they say, come on, women, you should go and get jobs. And then, of course, women went into the workplace. That's saturated the marketplace so that wages went down. And now men and women work together, and you've got all sorts of problems with sexual harassment and various stuff in the workplace. So, all because they couldn't tax a housewife.
But we're also...
You just got so many moms following you. You just got so many more fans.
I saw this, when my wife had little kids, it was often the case that she wasn't well treated in restaurants and so forth, especially if I wasn't there. So, and that wasn't good. I thought that was a sign of real cultural sickness, that a mother with a young child is treated badly. That's a very bad idea. And that's part of this casual contempt. So anyways, when you're 18 or 17 or 19 or 22, it's like, what do you want exactly? What do you want? And I wrote about that in chapter 3 of this new book, Beyond Order. Don't hide things in the fog. You have to let yourself know what you want. Well, so you make a list of what you want.
If you don't know what you want, a good way of starting is what you don't want. So make a list of what you don't want, and then that will help you figure out what you do want.
And what is that? Well, you want someone who's productive and generous and honest. That's a real good start. You want someone that you're physically attracted to.
Yes.
You want someone whose education and intelligence roughly match or exceed your own.
I should stop reading. Daddy Peterson's dating rules. Can't keep going.
Well, and then if you find someone like that, and
if she finds someone like that, she'll find another way of being disappointed or bored by him. So how, until you look at yourself in the mirror and realise that all these emotions that you're having about the guy are your projections onto him of what you're internally feeling about yourself, then you're never going to resolve any relationship issues.
Then that's who you want, right? And you should know that, and you should notice that. And because then at least you're looking in the right place. Like there's some...
Maybe you could also put into one of your podcasts or things, because I know a lot of young men follow you, to ask the girls out.
I do.
Again, this is what gets me so pissed off. Why don't you ask them out, Nicole? As the ones that come to you are no good enough for you, and you get, oh, this one's that, this one's that, this one's that. Oh, where's all the good guys? You've chucked them all away. Any ones that you were compatible with. So why don't you go after what you want? So again, just flip the advice back round on. Oh, men should do this. Well, maybe you should do this. Who you settle down with and have a baby with, and who you invite into your body, is the most personal decision you're ever going to make. And you're just saying, oh, I want abdication of that responsibility. They should ask me out. No, you should go and ask them out. You should take responsibility for your own dating life.
Give them a little extra bump.
I tell them all the time. It's like, get out there and ask. And say in my clinical practice too, it's like, you're not going to find someone unless you ask. And, for all their...
I agree with Jordan Peterson as well. I just disagree with what she said. This whole idea of, oh, they can come to me and ask me because I don't want to go and be rejected by anybody, because how could I be rejected by anybody? Fucking idiot.
There's a lot of criticism aimed at the... the men's movements that teach men how to be a player, how to attract women, there's a lot of negative press aimed at those. And I can understand why, because there's kind of a psychopathic element to it. But
you're constantly being rejected. So you have to develop an emotional numbness to it. And you have to be above it.
Element to it. But one of the things those movements do is to really encourage young men to overcome their fear of approaching women. And
the whole idea of the pickup artist, and then later the MGTOW and the incels and all that kind of stuff, was a reaction to the feminists. All the feminists came out with this hostility towards the opposite sex. So it no longer became collaboration, it became combative. So then the men became combative. And so it's a reaction to the feminist movement that wanted women to be more like men. Well, the men became more like women, and the whole gender dynamics flipped round. This whole thing about I'm single, young, independent, I don't need you, and I can just, you come to me and I'll constantly reject you. This kind of horseshit personality is this narcissistic tendency, this cliched narcissistic personality is what has been embedded into young women. And the women that are intelligent will just recognise it for what it is and discard it. But it's very insidious. It seeps in. And the whole idea of being a player and playing the game and all that kind of stuff, I don't agree with it. But I do appreciate the fact that it's so that you can distance yourself from it, so that you see yourself as like playing chess or something, or Monopoly or something like that. Like you're playing a character on the board, but you aren't that character. So when that character's rejected or you lose your money on Monopoly, it's not real money. It's not your real character. So that's why there's this avatar of who you are out there being played, and who is the player and playing the game, but it's not who you are. So that when the women destroy that, then you can't take it personally, because that's not really who you are. So if women were more kind, considerate, compassionate of the people that were approaching, there wouldn't be as much approach anxiety, and they'd be able to be more authentically who they are. But they won't. So because women viciously judge men when it comes to sexual selection, and it's not something that's socially constructed, it's something that's in their nature. It's there for a reason, and a very good reason.
To really encourage young men to overcome their fear of approaching women and even asking them for their phone number or for a date or for a conversation or for a coffee.
But in order to do that, you have to not care about the outcome, and then that just goes into not caring in general.
And put a profile up on a dating profile, dress up nicely, get a professional photograph taken, put your best foot forward, and have enough courage to approach some women and maybe get over your fear. And it's so, but I would say to young women, if you find someone who you think fits your criteria and you're not being asked out, ask them.
Fine, I'll do it and I will report back.
Well, what's the alternative? To wait and wither on the vine? That doesn't seem very useful.
Yeah, women have got less time to find a partner.
I don't want to do that. No, that sounds horrible. I didn't want to say horror, but then I did. Dang it. Okay. No, I don't want to do that. I love that. Thank you so much.
I have a question for you, and this is a stupid question, perhaps, but
no, go.
I've been very curious about apps like Tinder. Mm-hmm. And I talked to Abigail Schreier about this the other day, because there's some evidence that young people are having much less sex than they were 20 years ago. And so...
Yeah, especially now with the old coronavirus coming about everywhere.
With apps like Tinder, if what's happening is that a small number of men are getting a tremendous amount of sexual attention from women, and a huge number of men are getting none at all. And the guys that are attractive, say on Tinder, then have their selection. They have women who've already said yes, because that's the only people you communicate with on Tinder, if I understand it correctly. And so they have all these women at their disposal, essentially, and then almost no incentive, unless they're mature, to have a committed relationship. And so that puts the women in a terrible bind too, because the men that they find attractive are uncatchable in some sense, because
the women are voting for it, because of female competition.
Because the competition level is too high. And I have no idea if that's true, if that's actually something that is happening.
I feel like it's...
You know that expression, oh, he's one in a million kind of thing. Well, let's just scrap a million for a minute. Let's just say 10 men. Let's say you have 10 men and you rank them in the ways that they described earlier, like who's taller, who's more better looking, who's, all the things that women want. he's the top guy, and then all the others aren't as good. Well, all the women want the top guy. So now they're going to be fighting over the top guy, and they're not even going to look at the rest. So that's what happens. And now let's take that with women, for example, going back to what I was kind of talking about earlier. So a woman that's at the top of her game, who's making loads of money, who's young, who's intelligent, and who's attractive, there's less and less men for her. And she's going to want the best of those less men. So it's a 10% of a 10%. It's so difficult. And all women have to do is settle. But they're not going to.
Partially true. I feel like there's that level to it, exactly what you just said. But then there's also a psychological element that I think we aren't discussing, which is that men aren't necessarily attracted to prey that walks up to them and lays down dead. The hunting is gone.
That's rubbish. That's absolutely rubbish.
So I feel like a lot of times men can swipe and know, I can hook up with this girl tonight.
Well, maybe that's another conundrum. It's like, so, and I'm too old to be involved in any of this, so I don't understand it anymore. But if Tinder, for example, facilitates hookups,
yep.
What happens if you go on a Tinder date and you're female and you say no? Like, are you out of the pool then? Are you no longer? So are you pushed constantly for instant sexual favors, let's say?
Tinder is hookup central. That's what you're going on Tinder for. Hinge is more looking for a relationship, maybe more.
Okay, so they're sorting themselves out, the apps.
They're sorting, but there is.
Oh, I disagree with her so much, and it's a video in itself as to why I disagree with her, so I'm not even going to go into it.
There's levels to it for sure, where there are certain apps that, yeah, if you're not going to hook up with them, you don't meet up with them. That's what that's for. This is our instant sex app. And then
I just can't see that being, I don't think that's in anybody's good interest. But I particularly think it's not in the good interest of young women. I also don't think it's in the good interest of young men, because I think it teaches them to be psychopathic predators fundamentally. No, I mean that.
They have to be, because women are so competitive, and they put sex as fundamental in the relationship.
See, there's any way out of this, because if you repeatedly practice taking sexual intimacy out of the broader context, that's what you're practicing. Well, how is that not? It's shallow, because it's shallow by definition, because it's only the pursuit of hedonistic pleasure decontextualized. You don't know the person, you don't know their story, you're not involved in an ongoing adventure, you're not contributing to one another's lives, you're not dependent on each other. There's no relationship there. So,
because that's what most women want in the beginning. So that's what most men do, because they're serving the market. And the market of women is hugely competitive.
It's just a quick hit. Yep.
It's a quick contextless hit. Well, so then what is it? So then is it, if you practice interacting with women, but also with men, if you're a woman, as if they're a source of instant context-free gratification, how are you not training yourself to treat human beings as if they're nothing but instant sources of context-free gratification?
That's not what men are doing. That's how women are presenting themselves.
You are, which is the same as the porn addiction, which is why I also feel like men are having less sex, is because they can just go onto any porn site at any time of day, or even Instagram, and see all these porn stars and naked women, get what they wanted.
Well, yeah, because the majority of men aren't going to be able to have sex, so they go and have porn instead.
Out of an interaction with a woman, do it themselves, and then they have no reason to go on a date. They already got off. They don't care.
That's a bit like with the video games as well. I did really well in golf today. Oh, you could play golf on the Nintendo Wii. Well, that's not really playing golf, is it?
They don't care. And this is what I feel like myself and so many women I talk to have been sorting through, is a lot of these guys are already getting what they think they need. So when I might date a guy, I'll look at his Instagram. if he follows tons of porn stars, I don't even bother.
That's wise, I would say.
Thank you. They of course go, that's insecure. Why can't I look at all these girls? Are you insecure? I'm like, no.
No, it's so amazing to me that anyone would even think that wasn't a valid thing to do. I can't believe you'd ever get criticized for that. That's, I was talking to
I don't think you should be judging people on their social media so much. I think you should judge it based on how they treat you.
Theodore Dalrymple. That's not his real name. It's Anthony Stevens, a psychiatrist, and he saw 15,000 people who had tried to commit suicide.
Ooh.
Yes, woo is right. And these were people who were at the bottom of the economic hierarchy, devastated lives. And the women were often out with like psychopathic brutes. They were getting beaten all the time. And there were markers for that. Shaved head, scars everywhere, tattoos on their fists, love and hate, that sort of thing, like obvious markers,
Oh yeah, I should see those as obvious markers. They became so fashionable. I just thought it was fashion, but keep going.
Well, and that sort of thing also.
Because behavior replicates.
Does happen. But his point was, there were these obvious markers, but they weren't being paid attention to. It's, well, what you just described, well, that's an obvious marker to me. It's so obvious that I can't believe that you would be criticized for, and to say that that's a mark of insecurity, And I would also say look, here's one way of thinking. I've thought about this. It's like, what's the proper domain for sexual morality? What are the right rules? Don't do anything with anyone that you couldn't talk to them about. If you feel uncomfortable talking about what you're doing, you don't have a level of psychological intimacy that should allow for that level of physical intimacy. Obviously.
To me, that's obvious. But to her, it seems like a revelation, like an epiphany. It's like, well, yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. Jordan, that's good.
Also, it's a rule of thumb. I would also say that
the fact that she doesn't even think like that is worrying.
Generally, if you're female and young and attractive, it's in your best interest and in the best interest of the person that you're dating to say no for as long as you possibly can. If for no other reason, then it's without that.
I don't agree with that at all. No, I'm saying no to that. There you go.
Without that, well, where's the game?
Mm-hmm.
There's no game.
There shouldn't be a game. The only winning move is not to play the game. Life is the game. Life has plenty of things to give you to be getting on with. The last thing you need is unnecessary arguments and resistance from a person that you're supposedly trying to get into an intimate relationship with, who's constantly rejecting you, saying no. What are you talking about? I love Jordan Peterson, but I disagree with him on this point.
And you talked about the chase, and we have no idea how much deprivation proper romance requires.
Well, it requires honesty. And so you shouldn't be saying no just to create a chase and allow dishonesty into the relationship just to make it interesting. There's much more other ways of making it interesting that are honest.
It's definitely not zero, because look, why otherwise? What you meet up with Tinder, let's say, you go to a special room, you both watch pornography, you each have an orgasm, that's your date. Well, why not do that? If that's what it's about, that's simple. There's no mess. Well, there's some, but
only if it was fun. Yeah.
But obviously nobody thinks about that as ideal. And that would be the extreme case of contextless sexual gratification. But it's really wrong.
But you can have context without saying no.
It's wrong. It just doesn't serve anyone. It's terrible. And if
it's an honest no, that's fine. Absolutely 100%. But if you're saying no for a chase to play a game, which is what he's insinuating, I disagree with that completely.
That's the case with this endless stream of available pornography. It's a catastrophe.
That's what I think. I feel like we've rewired, especially young men, women as well, but especially young men or just men in general, that they're not even looking at women as people most of the time. Because even scrolling through Instagram, you're seeing naked people constantly. It didn't used to be like that 10 years ago. To see a woman naked was Playboy. It was almost still special and naughty.
But that's what women are doing to compete to get in front of high status males. So no one's forcing the women to do that. They're doing that to compete amongst other women because they're so viciously competitive.
I can remember the first time that I saw a naked woman in a video, in film. It was actually, if I remember correctly, it was in The Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie, because there's a scene where one of the girlfriends of one of the revolutionary types opens the curtains and she's naked. And that's the first time I saw. I think I had seen Playboy pictures before that, but it just blew me away. I can remember, and I think I was about 13 or so. And, it was a revelation of sorts, obviously. And now that's nothing. That's nothing. It's nothing. That's there in droves. Any boy can see more sexual imagery than anyone ever saw in their whole life 30 years ago.
And I know that it's not directly necessarily linked, but do you feel like that could be, this is my observation, is a rise of narcissism? Do you think any of this could be linked to the rise in narcissism and self-involvement? Or is that still just linked to early childhood stuff?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, to the degree that sexual gratification through pornography makes it possible to avoid the complexities of a relationship, the advantages of a relationship in modulating sort of immature narcissistic selfishness disappear. And I do think it's absolutely appropriate for young women to insist that they be treated the way they would like to be treated. You should insist upon that. Well, your partner should as well insist upon that treatment for him. But so you have to sit down and think about, well, how would you like to be treated? If you could have what you wanted, actually have it.
This feels like we're back at chapter 3. Yes.
Yeah, no, when I was dating, I had rules and structures and all that. And if they broke the rules, I never spoke to them again. It was just very basic. I ain't got enough time. I haven't got enough attention. I haven't got enough energy to put up with all the games and stuff, which is why you shouldn't make it a game. So it was more about being very selective in choosing who you're going to be intimate with. And I do agree with that. And you're going to end up naturally saying no a lot to that, but you're not going out with the intention to say no in order to get somebody to chase you.
Well, yes, and it's for precisely those reasons that I wrote it. But
I love that.
It's a funny thing I do believe though that that's the case, that no is the right answer most of the time. It's disciplined. That's part of it.
I don't think it's so much no. I think it's more a case of knowing what you want, going after it, like you said originally, being prepared to compromise, but also it's just about being very selective and very congruent. It's so easy for the majority of women to go out and get sex, and it's so hard for the majority of men to go out and get sex. And so that inequality, the feminists never talk about, is a huge problem in dating, because both sexes end up dissatisfied. The high status men never get a woman they can trust because they're too busy competing over each other. The women competing over each other for the high status men aren't satisfied because somebody else is always getting him. And the men at the bottom aren't getting anyone because the women are being competitive, fighting over the high status guy who can't trust anyone. So everybody loses because there's not somebody for everybody, because women want the best that they can get and they see that in the same ideal man.
It's provocative. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. It's guarding a secret.
They all want the gold medal. None of them want silver or bronze. They think they're entitled to it. They want, and this is what Kevin Samuels goes into when he has his popular YouTube channel. Like, average women expect above average men, and they won't settle for less.
Defending a treasure. It's adding some of the game. And it's a demand that certain preconditions have to be met. And it's the insistence that you be.
Yeah, and I do agree with him with that. Like I said, I had a structure and I had an ethos, I had a philosophy, I had a whole structure set up in place for dating. And even if I really liked the girl, if she broke one of my things, I just wouldn't see her again. So it's got to be that way.
Regarded as a complete person.
Yes.
And now, it's going to be tempting to young women too to separate their sexuality and say, well, I can go for instantaneous gratification just like a man. But I do believe that men and women both pay a tremendous price for instantaneous sexual gratification. I'm absolutely convinced of that. But I do believe that women pay a higher price. And the reason for that is that sex is more dangerous for women. And so it's.
But you can't say that because that doesn't suit gender equality.
Its capacity to produce catastrophe is heightened in women. And how could it be otherwise? Because
yeah, that was like a bar. That was like rapping what you just said. It's a catastrophe. I liked it. I'm going to rewind this and listen to that later. I personally, I was all about, I can act just like the guys and I can hook up with all these people. Like when I was much younger, I was like, I can be just like them because that's equal power.
It destroys your soul. Men can do it more readily and easily, but women, it really destroys their souls. In the same way that it's natural for a man to stand up to have a piss. But if a woman stands up to piss, she's going to get piss all down her legs. It's equal, but it's not natural.
And then I looked at all these female role models that I had, these pop stars, these Madonnas, these whatever. None of them are doing okay now. Kind of the generation or two generations above me that were promoting super promiscuity.
People were missold a mortgage or something. Well, feminism has missold promiscuous sex.
None of them have a life that I want now.
Well, look, I'm old now. I'm 60 and my wife is 60. Okay, so we're grandparents. And I can tell you what makes our lives worthwhile.
Go on.
Well,
grandchildren, family.
Well, I'm really attracted to my wife.
Get it, girl?
Well, and we've been, sorry.
Don't be sorry.
We've been
awesome.
Isolated from each other for a long time because we were both so sick. It's been 2 years, really. And the physical intimacy element of our marriage is extremely important. We're very careful about that and value it extremely highly and pay a tremendous amount of attention to it. It's really important that the sexual element, the romantic element, those two things, when they're properly handled, they're indistinguishable. And if you think that sex is okay without romance, you don't know anything about romance, because sex is so much better with romance that it's not even the same thing. So that's all important. But as you get older, what's important is that, well, you have a family, you have your children, you have your grandchildren, you have a continuity of narrative, you have a long-term relationship that you've built.
Yeah.
That's what's important. And when you're doing things impulsively, when you're young, you're not paying attention to the old you. You have to have the old you in mind. You're going to be old and you have to be building towards that, or you're going to be old and things are going to be a catastrophe.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that Jordan's saying here, but the problem is when you go on Tinder or one of the other dating apps, women on there aren't thinking like that. They're thinking about, oh, my boyfriend cheated on me, or I'm heartbroken and upset, so I'm going to go out and have revenge sex in order to get back at him. Oh, this guy's cute, I'll hook up with him, have a one-night stand with him. Even if the guy does like her, I'm not going, oh, don't bother me anymore. So it's like women are using men for sex constantly. So it's not, and that's what the feminists have kind of indoctrinated into women. It's brought out the worst aspects of the feminine, and in men as well. Because now men are too afraid to approach women because they're just so vicious and nasty. This
idea that you said, well, I can be just like those men. It's like, well, that isn't even the men you want.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't get this. I don't understand why the feminists are strong by imitating men. Shouldn't they be imitating the best women? But they don't pick the best men. They pick the nastiest men. So I'm going to pick the nastiest men, and we're going to act like that for equality. It's like, well, you just create more dickheads in the world. He's been a dickhead, so now you're going to act like a dickhead. That makes sense.
Yes.
Why would you imitate the men that you don't want?
Yes. Yes, Jordan, I didn't even mean for this conversation to go this way. I think what we've talked about in this topic is so important. We're gonna rock some women. We're gonna rock some people back to reality. That's exactly what I did. I was impersonating men that I didn't even want. They were the douchebags. They were, the vagabonds, the whatever we want to call them, the dickheads. Jordan Peterson, this was on my bucket list to have a chat with you. So this has been freaking awesome. This is 12 questions with Jordan Peterson for Beyond Order, 12 more rules for life. I freaking loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I do think that we did something different from the interviews that I frequently have. So that was very interesting and entertaining.